Thank you, friends, for being here again, joining us again. And I was just sitting in the silence and I was thinking, maybe we should give one of these for our tech team that has been with us all day and has got a lot. I just looked down here at all the cords on the ground. If you could see this, you'd be very impressed.
And for Leah with the children.
And for Leah, who's watching the children, yes. So the topic tonight is called Regathering Local and Regional Communities of Practice. And what this means is that I think the sense of several of us, or many of us maybe, is that it's a really challenging time out there. A lot of meetings are struggling. A lot of meetings have lost all their connections with families in the last 2.5 years. Like some meetings just have lost those connections. You know, there's a lot of meetings that may still they still may know some of those families, but they may not be coming regularly. Some meetings have begun to get first day school going and people may be coming back, but there's been a transition maybe in the teachers. And so maybe your meeting has had, like a generation of teachers, and with the pandemic, it's all of a sudden a shift and you're like, whoa, we're building from the start again. And so the first thing we wanted to do is just acknowledge that reality and just acknowledge that there's probably grief that people are feeling. There may be sadness, there may be frustration, feelings of guilt and disappointment in oneself, all kinds of stuff that could be there. And we just want to acknowledge that and let that all, this is just unprecedented time in all of our lives, and we're doing the best we know how. So we wanted to think about how we can support each other during this time, and how people may feel very isolated in their meetings, especially if they're the only person or one of a very few people thinking about children's religious education. And so the last probably winter, I guess it would have been January or February, we were thinking about how to support groups to come together in regional areas. And we were thinking particularly in the US that it wasn't clear whether this would happen for one thing in person. And we thought, well, at least maybe people could start meeting together in person in regional areas for a day workshop outdoors or something like that. You could plan something like that. And if you planned it outdoors and maybe you'd have indoor space, if you could use it and play it by ear, you could kind of count on something like that. And we also were recognizing that both in East Africa and in Latin America, we have friends who have begun to build kind of regional groups of support and learning communities of practice is the language we've been using. And so we wanted to think about, well, maybe the US is a big place and maybe we need to create some regional support here as well. So part of it is to learn from our brothers and sisters in East Africa and Latin America and see what they're doing. And Judith is going to share a little bit later about the conference that she's organized. So at any rate, so Melinda, Wenner, Bradley, and I thought, oh, well, we could create some resources. And so we kind of put together some different resources that we thought could be helpful to people who wanted to plan something in their region. And it would kind of help make it a lot easier if there were some things that were standardized that we could give them. And so we created some documents and we thought they might be used this spring, and then we were partly thinking if we did that in the spring, maybe the gathering this summer would have been completely, if it was completely online, at least people would have had some in-person time together. But as it became clear that we were going to do this gathering both in person and hybrid, it didn't seem like those were going to happen at the same time. So now we've kind of moved them later. And we're like, okay, these could come out of this workshop instead of be the precursor to it. Does that make sense? So you'll see some of the documents still say spring on them. So they need to be updated, but Melinda's, some of our PDFs that she had, and I couldn't change them easily. So they haven't been changed yet, but
Andrew wrote out just the shape.
okay. How is the translation going? Okay. Sure.
I have no idea if that,
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody in the Spanish channel with her.
I don't think there's anyone.
Can you, can you record on your machine?
Well, we're cloud recording. It should keep in file in every audio file. I've never checked.
I don't know how the recording works.
Brucey, keep going and I'll message you. I'm gonna check right now on the back end about the previous recordings. Great, that's what will happen. Thank you for asking.
Wait,
Well, if you can make post, maybe you be able to.
the speech checking is used to, it automatically records English and Spanish. Or just one. We don't know.
Great, you should just keep going.
Okay. All right, so at this point, Maisie has some material. So actually, if you could first just show the folder. So, so Maisie's gonna share his screen and you're gonna see a folder in a minute here with the documents that I'm talking about. Yep. Okay. So we're going to go through these documents so you can see what we've created and how you could use them if you felt like you had a nudge or some other people who want to help you to kind of put on a regional gathering to build a regional community of support. What do we call it? A community of practice, regional community practice, to start building that kind of stuff in your region. So actually, before I do that though, before you open number one, can you share a link to that folder in the chat? I think if you click on, click on the person there, the little person with the plus sign on his shoulder. Yeah. Oh, no, that's going to be the document. I think, yeah, that's the document. So go out of there for a second. If you, I think what you have to do is go.
Control click on the file folder. Oh, yeah, that'll work.
Yeah,
That should work, yeah.
yeah, that's it. Okay, great. So if you click on that link from your computer, then you'll have access to this drive and you should be able to open these documents yourself. And if you save that link, you'll have it later. If you don't, I'll also can I give you my email?
But we can send it up.
Okay, all right. Then
On the website?
um,
No, I think. it's in the-
we'll send out an email and it'll have my email address. So if you lose this and you want this folder, get in touch with me and I'll make sure that you can get into it. Any? I'm sorry?
That was my bad.
Okay.
You're good.
So why don't you open up number 1? I numbered them 1 through 8 so that they were easy to open up. Very proud of myself. So this is a document that Melinda created that's kind of explains what we were trying to do. So it's same theme, finding our footing on the path. It's kind of a description of how we thought you might use these documents. And then over on the right is actually a list of the documents. So and we'll go through each of these, but if you can kind of scan up, Maisie, so the first one is a template flyer that you could have, and it's just a simple template. It looks a lot like this, and you could put your name of your gathering in it, the registration link to how you want people to register, the dates, the location, boom, you tell us that, we'll stick it in there for you, and you got a flyer. The second one is a template to a Google form to use for registration. And again, like if people have used Google Forms, you know how easy it is to create a registration. If not, we'd be more than happy to help you do that by starting with this form. You can kind of see what it would look like. And then from that, you can create a spreadsheet that will list all the registrants. Then the next thing is there's a sample schedule that has some different modules that might be activities that you could do if you had a regional gathering of folks. QREC has contacts and some social media ways of reaching out. So there may be people in your region that we know of that you all don't know of. And so we could help you with that communication to connect with people in your region. We also would love on your registration if you connected people to us. So if they want to be connected to us so that we then have them in our database. Is there anything else there? Can you scoot that up? Oh, that's it. Okay. All right. So you can close that one now. And you can just go to number 2. You don't have to even close it. All right. So this is the sample flyer that we created. Again, you can put your name, the date, the location, and then the link right there to the registration. So it'd be a very easy way for anybody to do this, and we can help you do it. And the text could be changed, but this is the text that we came up with. QREC encourages friends to gather in regional groups and local settings to explore shared condition and resources for support. In-person gatherings this spring, and that's wherever we have to change it. It's not this spring and summer, it would be this fall and winter, or next spring. Will anchor the online, so that part has to change a bit, but the lessons of the pandemic continue, and while meetings and churches may be in different places, there are opportunities for renewal and redesign. Where do we find our religious education programs at this time? How do we envision the path ahead? What is your next step, and what is needed to find our footing on it? What provisions do we need for our next steps? So this would be a very simple kind of description that folks could use to advertise or put out a flyer. Next. Can't remember what comes up next. Oh, this is the registration. If you've done a Google form registration, it's very simple. It's very easy to adapt it. There's not much on it right now because we don't really know what you'd need. But we did put the stuff about, there'd be some questions that we could put at the end for QREC to help us connect with people. Next slide. And this is a sample schedule. So we imagine that, you might choose to do a 2-hour something, or you might choose to do a part day, or you might choose to do you know, a 9 to 3. We kind of created this as like a 9 to 3. You know, this would be a sample schedule. And again, we can help you adapt it as need be, but you know, kind of some basics like arrive and check-in, introductions, worship. And then these are some of the modules that we kind of imagined. And we'll, in a minute, we're going to look at these queries. So we've put together a number of queries that you could use with a group to help them explore where they're at. And we thought of it in terms of what is the condition of your meeting. So if you were having a regional gathering, each person would be there from their meeting and you would be inviting them to explore and share all the feelings they have about the condition of their meeting in terms of first day school this time. So there would be a real time for opening up and inviting people to share where they're at, because and to explore all those different emotions I was talking about before, but also find some places of energy and excitement. Lunch, and then we imagined we might, in the afternoon at 1, you might break out into small groups based on kind of interests. You might have an adult RE group, you might have a 3 through 8 group, you might have a different group, just to kind of get to know each other, find out who's doing things and talk more informally. And then we kind of imagined at the end of the day having a sharing of resources, and we're going to look at that in a minute as well. Does anybody have any questions at this point? Maybe I should just stop and take some questions if anybody.
Andrew, it's Nadine, Buffalo Friends meeting. I could imagine that if you kept this folder going, that people would use this, but maybe design others and be able to put them here also.
Right.
So we could start seeing various examples. So if anybody does do a regional gathering, it would be really nice to use this folder and, you know, have
Yeah,
the resources grow.
yeah. I also thought if
Practice.
if people took pictures, we could. In a second, you're going to see a very short slideshow, like 5 pictures or 4 pictures. You're right, but we could add to it. Yeah, is that the next one? Yeah. So this is a little slideshow. This is in Cuba, a gathering. Both this picture and the next one are friends who gathered in Cuba. So look at that. Look at all those people they gathered for their regional community of practice. Does any Beth or Sita, do you all know it? Can you tell us anything about that gathering? I saw the pictures, but that's all I know.
Gosh, the program was about mysticism and how that kind of challenged their sense of pedagogy. It was kind of an interesting perennial creato approach to things. She's a new Christian education clerk at the yearly meeting level, and she's identified 70 different Sunday school teachers in Cuba and then just galvanized them together. And QREC gave them some seed money for the conference. So she's having, this was I think May 28th, and they're gonna have one in September. So we're delighted and, you know, spirits rising.
I also showed these pictures to my first day school class with little kids and show them that there are Quakers in other parts of the world. Okay, we can go to the next. So, and then there's actually a few more pictures here. So this is from East Africa. Is that Judith? Is that Judith? Or is okay? So is that you?
Sorry, it's being weird.
Yeah, you suddenly got soft.
It's being weird.
Okay, so this is the
Better.
gathering in East. Is that actually you, Judith, or is that?
One of the.
Okay, it's hard to. And then there's a couple more pictures there. Oh, yeah, down there, I think. here's another picture from that gathering. The number printed materials there, and then go on one more. Then this is.
We can't hear you, Andrew.
It's going in and out and I don't understand why. It's Zoom's audio suppression because it's picking up. See, now it's picking you up fine. Keep going.
Okay, so any rate, I just wanted to show these pictures, and now Judith and Sita are both going to share just a bit. Judith, do you want to share now about the conference that she organized?
You can just leave it there.
Okay. Should I clip it back
Yeah.
up? Nope.
Thank you. Yeah, this is the African Quaker Religious Conference that was held in April 1st to March. And the conference, we had to gather teachers from all over Africa. Part of Africa, not all of it, because some of them we have not yet reached to them. But the ones I was able to conduct from Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Burundi. And we gathered for 3 days. We had a theme that we were talking about feed my flock from Peter 5:2, as Peter 5:2. Then we had some topics that were covered by Child Evangelism. It's an organization in Kenya that deals with the children, and they covered some of the topics they covered. Why do we evangelize to children? Children being final authority, teachers that touch life, preparing evangelistic Bible lessons, teaching memory verses, foundation for life, characteristics of children. Also, they had another one that says 1, 2, 3, Jesus loves me. Apart from that, also we had methodologies, and in methodologies, we were like doing the intergenerational, how to manage different ages in classroom. Then preparing lessons from the Bible. And we had who is our child. We had another lesson that was talking about who is our child. We had another one from Melinda, Godly Play and Faith and Play. And we were looking at the oral history and archives. So all these speakers were speaking to us as teachers on how to grow our Sunday school in Africa and what we can do when we collect these stories, the early Quaker stories, and use them in Godly Play or in Faith and Play to apply directly to the children. And it was really happy. We were really happy. It was really good to have all these teachers. And they were excited of the conference, how it took place, being our first conference in Africa section. It was really good. And we are looking forward to have more, maybe God willing next year through QREC, the support of QREC, that will be able to bring even more group or larger group of Africa so that they can get information and take to their respective yearly meetings. In this conference, we had various yearly meetings represented, Tanzania yearly meeting, Uganda yearly meeting, and Kenya being the largest, we had over 7 yearly meetings. And if we say like we want to have we are having like 23 yearly meetings as per now, we have to organize it in a way that we will be able to feed them, we'll be able to accommodate them, because it is just large. Kenya is just huge, and each yearly meeting has so many monthly meetings. Each monthly meetings are so many village meetings. So you find that we were just picking from the yearly meetings, and we were having about 32 teachers, but the total gathering, we were like 52 in Quaker homes in Nairobi, where we have the QREC office. Thank you.
So we are much earlier in the process in Northern Yearly Meeting. But I did get the Yearly Meeting Children and Youth Committee to bless the idea of having what we're calling a reboot retreat in the fall, probably late September or early October. And some friends in the middle of our geographical region have offered their meeting house as a place. And we're just envisioning this as a 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. very simple gathering in which we come together. We do some of the grieving that is spoken about here and have a very simple bag lunch or potluck lunch, and then, figure out our way forward together. We began imitating Philadelphia Yearly Meeting to have an online yearly meeting wide children's first day school once every other month. And that has gathered children together and has kind of begun to kindle children's religious education in some meetings in Northern Yearly Meeting. But during the pandemic, most meetings lost their first day school program altogether. So we're talking about reboot, and we're going to use these materials, and we'll tell you how it went.
Thank you both, Judith and Sita.
Can
Nadine,
I ask you a question?
yes?
So this just popped in my head, which is maybe if you had a little piece in there that was like a press release
Mm,
that we could
Mm.
put in the newspapers where we have a meeting. Like I'm thinking about this for our region, like Western New York, because our yearly meeting is pretty big. So I would just try to do the region. But I could imagine maybe having like a little press release. Because I think we need to let our communities know and
mhm.
welcome them into. Because a lot of the meetings are gonna go just like, well, I don't know. Well, a lot of our meetings, like, they don't even say. no, first-
Friends, the friends on Zoom cannot hear you when you speak without me moving the cameras. Yeah, try now, Sita.
Many monthly meetings and worship groups in our yearly meeting completely lost their first day school. Like they haven't taught a class since spring of 2020. So their teachers are long gone. Their families are feeling quite bereft. We found that out at the youth and family retreat. And so there's a hunger out there, but no structure, no infrastructure.
So in my imagination, from my region, I was thinking about calling the meetings, because I know people who are interested in kids. And saying, let's come together from the different monthly meetings. I don't know if this is designed just for the teachers. In my imagination, I would encourage us to bring the kids and the parents and the teachers, and that we would have a combination. I think we should be watching each other do these programs with the kids. Because a lot of people learn just from experiencing it. And then have other times where there's like activities for the kids and some of the teachers could have their own consultation time. But then they would go, if we put it out in the newspapers in each of those locations where we have a teacher going back, right? Then if new people came to the meeting, there's somebody to receive them. So that was what my imagination did.
Mike?
If you're going to potentially pursue newspapers as a way to recruit people, it might also be worth doing some research around where are families actually going for information, right? Because I have a colleague that could not find any staff for her zip line tour, just couldn't find anybody. And she had her staff that she did have take control of her TikTok channel. Actually, they created it. And the TikTok channel is where all of her new staff came from, because they saw these videos on this thing that they were looking at. If she had put something in the newspaper, they never would have come. mean, I used to sort of look at newspapers 20 years ago. I couldn't tell you the last time I actually looked at a newspaper.
True.
So talking to the families that you still are in communication with, what are you actually looking at? Where are you getting information? Where should I go to recruit people? I think would be really helpful.
So these are great ideas and they're gonna feed right into session or one thing first, and then we're gonna talk about the ideas. So were there any other questions? About
Hold on, Andrew. The audio did the weird thing.
Okay.
Just maybe so people know, the mic is being weird, and when I switch it to these mics for the crosstalk, this starts doing audio suppression, but it's back now.
right, okay. So I was just saying that in a minute, we're gonna talk about some ideas and some next steps. But before we do that, I just want to look at the queries that we put together to share with you all. So these were just some thoughts, some questions that we thought could be useful for that. Remember the sort of modular schedule we had at the first part that would help folks open up and think about and see how they're feeling about their first day school program. So this document's also in that folder, so you can get to it if you'd like. So the queries are, what has your meeting been able to support in terms of RE programming during the pandemic time? What has been lost? What has fallen away? What season are you in? How has your meeting maintained RE programming through the pandemic time? What new things have you tried? Where are you now in terms of your energy and your capacity for RE? Do we want to use this as a time to try new things or even completely reimagine how religious education can work in a Quaker meeting? Those of you that know Melinda know that that was her question. I tend to be like, let's stick with the old because it works pretty good in my meeting. Do you have any sense or possible thoughts about next steps that might support your meeting at this time and in the coming months? Where has the light been for you in the last 2 years? What have you done before that you are ready to release? What dreams do you have for intergenerational spiritual community? So probably those questions could fill a morning, I think, for most Quakers. At least, well, I won't go down that through them. Okay. So now why don't you move us on to the last one? And so this one is where we began brainstorming possible next steps. So the way we're thinking is that you go through this with people, you go through those first questions with people, open them up, get them talking, break them up into small groups so that they can talk to people that are doing similar things. And then toward the end, just like putting out some different possible new next steps and then break them up again to talk about these ideas. And so one thing that my meeting, well, I'll just say, one idea, if you're in a meeting that has no connection to children or families, the thing is right now, some of these young families are really would love support. I mean, the truth is that if you just in your meeting had a ministry that was not about even ministering to children that are Quakers, but just providing support to parents would be a great way to begin to get relationships. I mean, some of the young parents, this has been crazy hard couple of years for them, completely isolating. If they don't have family near them, they've lost their relationship. Some of them have moved, during this time, and they're bereft. And so if we could really genuinely hold out a ministry of just supporting parents, no strings attached. You don't have to come to meeting for worship. We just want to support you. And if this grows into something great, if not, we're just supporting you in the short run. And you could do that by, if if you did some background checks on your volunteers and maybe hired a couple teenagers to help, and you could say to parents, we have background checked free childcare, 15 kids on every Friday night.
And you know, the other thing that's coming down the pike with. Sadly, I don't think they're. I'm not questioning people's right to make reproductive.
Please speak into a mic.
Yep, you need to wait for me, my friends. Here you go.
There's trouble coming down the pipe because with with the end of Roe v. Wade, there are families that are already under so much stress, and you add some unplanned, at times unwanted pregnancies onto that, and it's a formula for child abuse and neglect. And so parenting education is going to be huge for families at risk of this.
All right, so that's another, there's
Poverty
another,
is an indicator, educational.
right, so there's another idea. There's a couple in our meeting that has done,
I'm gonna
Oh.
switch the microphone. So you have better mic, but it's gonna take a second because it's thinking about it. Because it wants to suppress all the crosstalk, which is fine.
Can't hear.
I know.
Okay, sorry.
We're working on it. It just doesn't like all of the noise. Zoom doesn't. Hold on. What if I do low audio suppression?
Jen
Does
is
that
just
fix it?
mumbling while she's trying to do the test.
You know what? That probably fixed it. There we go. What do you think about that?
all right, how's that? Can you hear me now?
Great.
Thank you. Good.
Good. What I was gonna say was that, there's a couple, we're generating ideas here, possible next steps. There's a couple in my meeting who has done parenting workshops for a long time amongst friends, but what if a meeting said, we wanna have childcare and parenting workshops and no strings attached? The philosophy is coming out of our Quaker background, but you don't have to be a Quaker to do it. That could be another way to make relationships with families. Having a playground is huge. During COVID, we are really fortunate in Durham meeting to have a really nice playground and a really nice library of children's books. And, you can just, for the first year that we got back to having children's programming, we just had the kids playing outside together. And that was enough to get parents to come. So you could have a meal, little time outdoors, couple stories, no strings attached. Another idea came up. There was a time in my meeting, in Durham meeting back years ago, when a good friend of mine who now I didn't know him very well at the time, stood up in meeting for worship and said, we can't keep coming to this meeting if there's not consistent childcare. And he goes, I know that I'm not supposed to say, just stand up in the middle of the meeting and say this, but I can't sit here and not say that. And then he sat down. And Durham meeting said, okay, we got to have consistent childcare. And so we just said, we're hiring 2 people to be there every week, regardless of whether there's any kids. Because if people can't, if there's not the baseline that you can show up and bring their kids, they can't come, and nobody wants to come and not know whether it's going to happen. And so you have to first do, if you want to have parents in your meeting for worship, you gotta provide that basic. Doesn't have to be a lot, but it's got to be safe. It's got to be consistent. Yeah. And you can do that in any meeting. It's not that expensive, and it's worth the money down the road. Within a few years, Durham meetings child care program had grown exponentially, literally within 3 or 4 years. And I said that was like the most prophetic ministry we ever had in our. He thought he was doing something wrong, and I said, the message you gave was a message we needed to hear. Wow. And my family, when we moved up to to Massachusetts, and we were in New England yearly meeting. My wife was in residency, and we went to Lawrence meeting, which had no kids. And actually my kids loved it because they were in new schools and all this stuff, and they loved going somewhere where there was just the two of them. And Janice, what's Janice's? Janice Sifferlin was there, and she every week just played games with my kids, and they made board games about Moses, and they like Janice had all this stuff in her car, and she just pull it into the room, and they loved that. It was just the two of them, and you know, for 4 years, it was wonderful. And you know, my wife was in residency; she was gone all the time. I actually would go. It was an afternoon meeting for worship, so I would go down to Fresh Pond and take advantage of their first day school with my kids, and then we go out to eat, and we drive back up to Lawrence, and then I'd go to the afternoon, and I get worship in twice on Sunday. I mean, that was so supportive of me. It was so simple.
Yeah.
So if meetings can just realize they got to provide that consistency. If you're at a meeting where you are fortunate to even have a few kids, we talked in the earlier workshop that Sita and Crystal Jorgensen and others were leading about intergenerational worship, and I was really feeling this afternoon like that is the next step for my meeting right now. We really need to do that. We really need the kids to bring us back together and to help us find a sense of our center again. They're probably the only ones that can do that. So there's various ways to do that depending on your situation. Melinda's talked about the corner of the meeting house where you create a welcoming area where parents could sit with their kids and babies could sit and play, and just make part of the meeting house like a place for kids to sit. Wait, hold on.
Oh, okay, we need to change. Do you want to come up here? That would be easier for me.
Leanne Williams, Friends in Common, North Idaho. I just wanted to piggyback on that my husband and I have been in a couple non-Quaker churches, but one in Lake Tahoe area where they had an entire half of their worshiping area with pillows and rocking chairs and blankies and soft toys and banners, so that kids that need to move and worship, which is not a Quaker thing, but it was very much their thing. You know, it was a kid space where they could wave the little fluttery ribbons and it didn't make noise. And, you know, I mean, it was just so welcoming. It was just a lovely space. And there's a Lutheran church in our community now that in their bulletin thing, they have a lovely statement saying, we want your children. We want them up front where they can see what's happening. We don't care if they make noise. They're welcome here. And if anybody gives you any grief, let us know. You know, I mean, they say it in a much nicer way, but and every time we visited there, because we've taken our grandsons there who are really little non-church boys, they're fine. You know, and that congregation has been trained. We want families, we want children. We put it in writing. We tell you every week, like, be nice, you know, or go home. Anyway, but it's such an intentional, welcoming practice that has changed the culture of that worshiping community. So people know, oh, if I have unruly grandchildren that are unchurched, I can go there, you know, for Christmas Eve, and they'll welcome me.
That also reminds me of something that I started to put down as an idea, but I didn't, because I didn't word it well. But one of the questions is, does your meeting want to have children? And that's actually a question you have to ask yourselves. And if a meeting were to start creating a space in the worship room, that would take a conversation, or if they were gonna post something outside the meeting house or someplace, that would take a conversation, and that conversation might just, a lot might come out of that conversation that could be quite helpful in understanding why there aren't children in your meeting. If it turns out that some of the people really don't want to have disruption, then that's a big issue. And if some people do want to have children, then you might need to have 2 meetings for worship or something, like
Yeah.
those are real issues.
Andrew's friend Laura in the chat says, that is prophetic, Andrew. Family planning for meetings. Do you want to have children?
That's great.
Just generally in the vicinity of this thing would be awesome. It's much clearer.
Yeah, I am just happy with that statement that Diana said about we want children. As I've been doing my traveling in the ministry in this country, in fact, many times I've been asking Beth, because I could see many meetings are dying in course whereby we have older people and we have no young generation, we don't have children. And the way Andrew is saying that if you can just put that, we want children, we will welcome them, we'll take care of them. And I've been looking at it and asking that, because some of the meetings, there was a time I attended New York yearly sessions. I've been attending other monthly meeting sessions, and it is like, we are only grown-ups, we are only old people, we don't have children. Our children went to other states, they moved to other places, they went to other churches. But the moment you put it like that and children come in, even from other denominations, from other churches, you will find that when they find this place to be loving, this place to be accommodating, even the parents will come in and you will have like, you are fishing, you are fishers of men, you are welcoming them, and this parent will see to it. If I can be welcomed here with my children, if they can be accommodated here, why can't I join this church? Why can't I join this meeting? Why can't I be one of them? Instead of going, either sitting at home or going to another place where they will not accommodate my children. So I don't know whether QREC can come in and just educate meetings, because some of them might not be knowing what to do. They are just like, we are old people, our meetings are dying, and they're just sitting. So if it can be a wake-up call to some meetings, and they can put satellite posters and they can work for them, and you'll find that instead of this meeting turning to be maybe museums and other things, libraries, they will revive again and they will start worshiping again. I like the idea. Thank you.
There was a thought I had. So if you, what was that thought? I really want that thought.
What do you think?
Please, come on.
Okay.
Come on up, friend.
So, Andrew, your comment about does the meeting really want children? And you might have a special meeting for business to discuss that. And I'm reminded that in our meeting, we had an older woman, single, no children. And the children, of course, would come in the first 15 minutes. And invariably, if there was a baby that was crying, we knew Jerry Gorley would stand up very slowly and say, "We are so happy to have our children here, to hear these voices, to hear this crying." I mean, first of all, she welcomed the parents because the parents are freaking out. But every time a child would cry like that, she would stand up. Well, she's passed away since. And every time a child would stand up, somebody invariably would say, Jerry Gorley would now say. So, and I say that because it wasn't the whole meeting necessarily that talked about this, but it was Jerry Gorley. And we talk about the importance of parents and support. She never had children. She loved children, and she came to meeting to hear children. So she had the leadership role, and it helped her, not just parents.
Well, let me give my thought here before I forget. So the other piece to this is that right now is actually an opportunity because families are isolated and they've stopped doing a lot of things. So if we create a space that welcomes them and invites them and makes them feel like they are supported, it's like an invitation at a time when we've actually had 3 new families come in like the last month and a half. And like people I've never seen before. And it's like, these people are clearly looking for something that they don't have. So I just want to hold that up, that the pandemic is, all this is crazy and it's an opportunity at the same time. So, Nadine?
Nadine, you can be heard anywhere.
You think? One of the things that came to me that I wanted to share, and I encourage you to share with your meeting and your neighboring meetings, is that I tell newcomers when they come with children, we have this silent worship, but your children do not disrupt the worship. And that parents always hear 1,000 times more than everybody else. So it's not your responsibility to decide if the children are disrupting the meeting or not. We have a ministry and council. And if any of the children are felt like they're being disruptive to the worship, someone from ministry and council will go out with them. And so they are welcomed into worship with us, and our kids stay a long time in worship, actually. I don't like to schedule religious education in competition with worship. We have the soft toys and the stuff for kids to play. And the ministry and council person would take them out and do supervised silent play. And they'd go out and they're like, my friends aren't here. And then they want to go back into meeting. but just to let parents know that their kids are not considered disruptive and that it's somebody else's responsibility in the community to take care of that or to let you know. And if anybody invites your child out, you can go with them, like letting them know how this is handled, because they don't know. And so they're really nervous about causing trouble in the meeting. And I think that's super important to keep them.
There's a comment from friend Daniel in the chat. It says, there seems to be a clear intersection between outreach, interest, and religious education. Why have we compartmentalized these 2 aspects? It occurs to me that all of this is encapsulated in one idea of hospitality.
Wait, can I comment on hospitality first? So I did a workshop at FGC and I had this clarity for myself anyway about the difference between inclusion and hospitality. And that oftentimes in friends meetings in the US particularly, we emphasize inclusion. And the difference for me is that hospitality is a community that has something to offer. I mean, there is it's the balance between having some structure and some boundaries so that you know who you are and what you can offer, and then you can offer hospitality. Sometimes we just are so quick to go for inclusion that we give away we sell the farm.
Yeah.
So 2 years ago at one of these conferences, there was a adult religious education workshop, and the participants really came to a clear place that adult religious ed and outreach were sort of inextricably intertwined. But I think there is a small fledgling working circle working on that. But this takes it really, it's about family outreach too, that the purview needs to be a little wider. And this is kind of a moment of opportunity. I remember when, you know, George Bush was president and I was an RE coordinator. I really thought he's good for business. My Quaker meeting is filling up, but because people were so distressed. But we didn't do a good job with faith formation. And when President Obama was elected, they all stayed home with the New York Times and bagels. Do you know what I mean? We didn't really show them or help them find the treasure of Quakerism that can guide and shape their lives. So, you know, we're in troubled times again as the COVID stuff begins to ease. Troubled folks may come in just wanting sanctuary and shelter from the troubles of life, but we've got to do a better job with faith formation this time so they really understand what's there.
I'm just the seat warmer.
Well, I was thinking about Andrew's last comment about, you know, having something to offer for hospitality and the idea of inclusion versus hospitality. And one of the things I have noticed in North American Quakerism is we often other people that we want to be involved, right? We want the BIPOC community to come and worship with us, but they come and then they leave, right? They want the young adults to come and worship with all of the older Quakers. And like when I joined, I was 30, not really a young adult anymore, but I got put into that thing because I was so much younger than everybody else. And I felt so much more comfortable with the young adults because they just accepted me and didn't be like, oh, good, here's another 30-year-old white guy. You know, it was, you know, I was othered as a younger person, and it like boggles my mind because I never really have been a young adult Quaker. And, you know, if we're trying to bring other peoples into our community, or just anybody, right? It doesn't matter who they are, if we're viewing them as different or special because they're not what we are wanting or looking for, like we have work we need to do on ourselves.
Yeah.
Right? You know, when I was dating, I had a brutal breakup. And at some point I read the idea of like, you need to become the one before you're going to find the one that's going to solve all your problems. Because everybody here probably has realized that doesn't actually happen, right? Like, you know, if you go looking for a relationship to make you whole, you're not going to be whole, right? You know, that you need to find that wholeness in yourself. And then that opens up the space for you to be able to offer the hospitality and know what your gifts are. And I think a lot of our friends, like they want things to change and they're looking for everything outside themselves to change so that they can, you know, that's where they're looking for the change instead of saying like, all right, people of color coming into our worship group, and the ones that have stayed are courageous and powerful and strong, and they are telling us something is wrong and we are not listening to them and we are not changing. And we need to, right? And we do that to families. Like I see it almost, not all the, I'll see it all the time. I see it a lot. People hold the kids up and treat them as something special, as something different, instead of doing a lot of the stuff that y'all are actually talking about. I think a lot of y'all are doing a really good job. I think that's my thought.
Laura in the chat says, thank you for naming this, Daniel. Hospitality is a theme that I have been hearing for the last few years, and especially at our friends meeting, where we model hospitality by hosting people in process of immigration. In turn, we are learning about how much we need to hold one offer on another moments of hospitality. Those interchanges happen to be forming mostly in interactions that are intergenerational and with the many, many visitors, parentheses, most of whom are young adults and new families.
There were a few more ideas that I want to share. I also wrote down some. I want to hold up now what Nadine said earlier about these regional gatherings might be times where everybody comes and we learn by doing rather than telling. So that was a very interesting thought. We could, at my meeting, we could host friends to come with their children and we could do a day of religious education with the kids, and then that would be a teaching moment for the people who came with the kids. Where were we?
Andrew, you could repeat it up there, but we could do that at different meetings. We could see if a few meetings wanted to do that, and that would be inner visitation among meetings also, which is really healthy.
I don't think you've talked about the.
Okay. So if we were gonna, okay, I'm gonna get back to this for a minute, and if we need to, we'll go aside. So I was talking about how for my meeting, I feel like the thing we need to do now is this intergenerational thing. And so for me, in these next steps, this is the one that's sort of resonating. And the resources, we talked about a corner of the room set up for children and families. We talked about some different forms of intergenerational worship, like a story or a godly play story or faith and play story at the beginning, maybe, of your worship, where everybody's together, and might be, a radical thing for Durham meeting to have a semi-programmed once a month meeting for worship, but it might be really good for us. The handouts that we got at 4:00 today, if you had it, I'm going to go back to I'm lucky to have a really children's ministries committee, and we can look at those. We can start talking about intergenerational worship, and we can look at some of the ideas that are generated on the 6 pages that we got at 4:00. Yeah, so I'm going to go down to 4 now. If you have a committee already in your meeting that looks at children's ministries, can you scroll up? Yeah, not that. There you go. Here are some ideas that you might also consider. So one of the things we did to kind of reinvigorate, I said that for the first year after we started meeting again, we just had childcare on the playground. And then we'd lost all our teachers. So we were starting from scratch with new teachers. And in January, I read Sparkling Still, the curriculum that is on the probably in this room somewhere. And we and that was really helpful to me. It's such a great sort of framework for just creating, and it's so flexible. So it was a really great resource for me. So if you're in a meeting and you've got a couple people who want to think about what's the next step, read that together. That really help, also buy some books, because Melinda has this, actually, if you click on the link there, Maisie, Melinda has this What's New planning guide that is quite interesting. And this is something that you could go through with your committee of people at your meeting, or just a couple people that are interested. And it kind of has a series of exercises about where the light has been for you, what do you know for the coming season. There's a section on what do you want to give up from how you were doing things. It's just a very provocative worksheet that you could do with somebody. It's a very simple exercise, but it could really help provide some energy and levity as you're thinking about these things. Can you go back now? That document is also in the folder if you want to look at it. There. Yeah, there you go. Oh, and the last thing I just wanted to say, well, there's the last thing for your meeting is the website. If people don't know the QRESU website, there are some fantastic resources on it. The resource library, and then also pages that have, we call them topic pages, that's what I call them, but you know, like the Faith at Home, there's just so much there. And so that was something that I shared with my children's ministries committee as they were kind of beginning to get, you know, their feet wet. And then the last thing I want to say, so anyway, so the idea is that these would all be ideas, and there was a million more, obviously, that could spark some excitement. And if you had one of these regional gatherings, and it might even be that out of that regional gathering, you create some support. And, you know, one of the tools that we do have now is Zoom. And so you could actually have a couple times a month, you could get together with people in your region and talk about what you're doing, have an accountability group. I thought, you know, like, maybe that's too strong a language, a listening, you know, kind of opportunity where what is the next step we're working on right now, and then connect with those people again in your small group in a couple weeks and say, this is what's going right, this is what's not going right, now this is the next step. I'm really into experiment with light, so I even thought of you could even do it like in a sort of like experiment with light kind of style, where you sit and worship and you listen for what's going on for you emotionally and sort of spiritually around RE, and then journal a little bit and then share as a group. So it could even be a spiritual exercise as a way of sort of enlivening the spiritual life in our meetings. That's what I got, I think. I think that's all I've got. I was gonna say, you know, at one point, I was gonna think we would break up in small groups and talk, but I think we did that in the large groups. So are there other questions or comments or things that people would like to share at this time? You want to come up here?
Okay, I did share it before, but I think it's still relevant. First, you mentioned something about, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's kind of a question. Is it standard to have an abuse prevention policy, child abuse prevention policy? Yeah. Okay, because I know our meeting does, and it was very heavily like, this needs to happen now. Because that gets presented to the parents when they bring a new child. They're like, here's our policy. Do you feel comfortable with this? What do we need to make your child have free childcare? Because that's the thing, is that also I think that, I know for my family specifically, my parents have 8 kids. They would regularly bring 7 because my older sister wouldn't come to meeting. But that was the time that they had to do their thing. And especially for my mom, my dad would usually stay with us. But it was crucial for my mom to be able to have that time. And a lot of parents said that that was also true for them. And the reason that they felt like they could come to meeting is because we had a stable childcare provider and multiple other committee members that would be in the room regularly taking care of their kids. So there wasn't this flux of like, who's going to be taking care of my kid? I don't really trust this person. I don't really know this person. And for smaller meetings, that's probably not a problem, but our meeting has over 100 members. So that's like a big thing if there wasn't one. And lastly, kind of like, just, I think we just need to change the expectation of what silent worship is to be able to welcome kids, because if there's this projection of, as Quakers, we worship in silence, then if there are children, then it's like, oh no, I don't feel comfortable anymore. And also I hear a lot that like, oh, Quakerism's gonna die. It's this horrible, it's like so sad, it hurts my soul, it's dying. Like, then why aren't you making us the present now? Because everyone's like, children are the future. Well, if we can't be the future if you're not wanting us to be there now. if you don't want to support the growth of children and young adults now, then we can't become good Quakers for you to build Quakerism later. So it's changing the expectations of what that is to fully support us and make us feel welcome. Because I sometimes feel very intimidated by going into silent worship for an hour. Like I have multiple neurodiversities, and I can't usually sit in worship silently, quietly, without doing something for an hour. So to expect a little kid to be able to be quiet is not gonna happen. So our yearly meeting has for memorials, which they find the most important for the kids to be at. They put a pile of pillows in the middle with a bunch of drawing materials and they just stick all the kids there. And it's wonderful and everyone loves it. But then at other times they're like, no, the kids will go have their childcare. So it's like, it's this balance of like, we either decide to do that or we decide to have a really good childcare program that also is accepting of the kids in worship and they get to kind of choose. I don't know, just thoughts. Probably rambly.
Are there other friends who have a comment or question or reflection before we close? Is there anybody on Zoom out there who wants to join? Share a thought, comment? I keep looking at you up there, but you're there. Every time I look up to my left, I'm looking at you.
Laura has her hand raised.
Okay. Laura?
Yeah, I was daydreaming the other day about sort of how to make the plug at our meeting. And part of it was to say like, hey, everyone, I feel so what a gift it has been for the last 3 years to hold our youth program together and to help us come through this time of COVID. And that I'm nearing the time where I need to release the ministry of doing, sorry, I'm a crying Quaker like our friend Yanni, doing the programming of for our youth, that I did it virtually, and I'm feeling so clear that I've done my part. And so the metaphor that was coming to mind was like, it's like the jar of honey has been so sweet. And the wonderful thing I realized is that it's like we're at the end of the jar of honey, and it's golden and it's sweet and there's still honey at the bottom. But we need people to be there with the people who've been helping there be this pot of honey. And so I'm trying to think of ways, and doing the yearly meeting work, especially in the virtual time, and trying to pull together programming. It was so disheartening to hear over and over again friends say, we hear you asking about our children. We have no children. We have no children. And so when you ask us, who do we invite? And then on the opposite side of that is the fact that there are children. And so like preparing for this conference, hearing through the woodwork, like who might be interested in coming, and hearing the idea of creating regional moments to invite people in. Like it feels like holding that pot of honey, and that there's sweetness and it's golden. And when I think about like, oh, how do I have the energy to help us pull together our next year, and what are we training and what are we pulling together with our policies? But when I think about that golden pot of honey of like all these beautiful lights of these children, and just even thinking about meeting people here today, and really like that joy of wanting to know your children. And that's what happens at our meetings. People say the joy of like, here are the children, I want to know them, I want to meet them, rather than I'm terrified of coming to see the children. It's sort of, how do we get our mindset out of this place of the pot of golden honey is almost empty. So that's the message I'm working on right now. Thank you for listening.
I know I've already spoken, but I feel like
Laura has triplets.
I have already spoken, but I feel like this is necessary. We can get our heads so when we come to something like this and we have all these great ideas and visions and yearnings, that it can feel far more complex than it is. Developing a program or pulling a regional meeting together, or what are we going to do for the next year? But I want to remind us that we are finding the path, the footsteps on the path forward. So really, what I need to ask is, what is the next step for our community that hasn't really gathered all together for 2 years? We had to ask, what do we need? Our kids are about to go back to school, and there's lots to be afraid of. And it's really hard to distinguish between legitimate fears and anxiety. And that's something that we all hold: adults, children, Quakers, non-Quakers, Republicans, Democrats, name it. We all have fear and anxiety and need support and tools and community to find our grounding in that. So our next one step is to have invite the people that we know from our community and beyond, and it'll be in North Idaho. It's hard to pull together an interfaith group, but we might be able to have a kind of interdenominational-ish and agnostic group or something like that. But to just invite the people we know. We don't have to worry about people we don't know. We're just going to have dinner together in the park and talk about what's the difference between fear that's real and legitimate and anxiety. How do we know the difference? And we're just going to let the kids play at the park. The adults will work through it. And from that conversation, we'll begin to shape. And so how do we talk to our kids about that? That's it. The one step. What do we need? What's the next one step? And that's enough.
So I want to close us now. I want to just share one thing that after the workshop that Oriana and I led at 2:00 today, I called Oriana afterward and we were checking in about how it went. And she said, you know, this is so sweet. So I got to tell you, so Oriana grew up in Durham meeting, and she just got married this summer, and the man she married also grew up in Durham meeting, and they've dated since they were in high school. So this is a very special summer for us in some ways. But Oriana said, she said, you know, the thing about meeting is there's people there you don't really know, but they care about you, you know, and it made me think about, like, what other place are we part of a community where we can say our children, and we mean people. We're talking about children who we might not have ever talked to. I mean, it's really a beautiful opportunity. And I just thought it was sweet that she shared that. And that she could say from her own experience, having grown up in Durham meeting, she was a little one and grew up all the way, that she feels that, you know, and that they chose to be married in the care of the meeting. So anyway. So let's close with a little worship, and it's great to be together tonight. Thank you, friends, for being together. Have a good evening. Rest well.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, thank you, Andrew.
You're giving me a whole 4 minutes. Bye, Fred.
But,